In the history of economic thought, a school of economic thought is a group of economic thinkers who share the common perspective on the way economies work. While economists do not always fit into particular schools, particularly in modern times, classifying economists into schools of thought is common. Economic thought may be roughly divided into three phases: pre-modern, early modern and modern. Systematic economic theory has been developed mainly since the beginning of what is termed the modern era. Currently, the great majority of economists follow an approach referred to as mainstream economics. Within the mainstream in the United States, distinctions can be made between the saltwater school and the more laissez-faire ideas of the freshwater school. Both of these schools of thought are associated with the neoclassical synthesis. Some influential approaches of the past, such as the historical school of economics and institutional economics, have become defunct or have declined in influence, and are now considered heterodox approaches. Other long-standing heterodox schools of economic thought include Austrian economics and Marxian economics. Some more recent developments in economic thought, such as feminist economics and ecological economics, adapt and critique mainstream approaches with an emphasis on particular issues rather than are developing as independent schools. Ancient economic thought: Chanakya, Xenophon, Aristotle, Qin Shi Huang, Wang Anshi. Islamic economics. Islamic economics is the practice of economics in accordance with Islamic law. The origins can be traced back to the Caliphate, where an early market economy and some of the earliest forms of merchant capitalism took root between the 8th–12th centuries, which some refer to as Islamic capitalism. Islamic economics seeks to enforce Islamic regulations not only on personal issues, but to implement broader economic goals and policies of an Islamic society based on uplifting the deprived masses. It was founded on free and unhindered circulation of wealth so as to handsomely reach even the lowest echelons of society. One distinguishing feature is the tax on wealth, and bans levying taxes on all kinds of trade and transactions. Another distinguishing feature is prohibition of interest in the form of excess charged while trading in money. Its pronouncement on use of paper currency also stands out. Though promissory notes are recognized, they must be fully backed by reserves. Fractional reserve banking is disallowed as a form of breach of trust. It saw innovations such as trading companies, big businesses, contracts, bills of exchange, long-distance international trade, the first forms of partnership such as limited partnerships, and the earliest forms of credit, debt, profit, loss, capital accumulation, circulating capital, capital expenditure, revenue, checks, promissory notes, trusts, startup companies, savings accounts, transactional accounts, pawning, loaning, exchange rates, bankers, money changes, ledgers, deposits, assignments, the double-entry bookkeeping system, lawsuits, and agency institution. This school has seen a revived interest in development and understanding since the later part of the 20th century. Muhammad, Abu Hanifa and Nu'man, Abu Yusuf, Al-Farabi, Shams al-Moali, Abul Hasan Qaboos, Ibn Wushamga, Ibn Sina, Ibn Miskawayh, Al-Ghazali, Al-Mawardi, Nasir al-Din al-Tusi, Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Khaldun, Al-Makrisi. Scholasticism: Nicole Osma, Thomas Aquinas, School of Salamanca, Leonardus Lessius. Mercantilism: economic policy in Europe during the late Middle Ages and early Renaissance treated economic activity as a good which was to be taxed to raise revenues for the nobility and the church. Economic exchanges were regulated by feudal rights, such as the right to collect a toll or hold a fair, as well as guild restrictions and religious restrictions on lending. Economic policy, such as it was designed to encourage trade through a particular area. Because of the importance of social class, sumptuary laws were enacted, regulating dress and housing, including allowable styles, materials and frequency of purchase for different classes. Niccolò Machiavelli, in his book The Prince, was one of the first authors to theorize economic policy in the form of advice. He did so by stating that princes and republics should limit their expenditures, and prevent either the wealthy or the populace from despoiling the other. In this way a state would be seen as generous because it was not a heavy burden on its citizens. Gerard de Malinege, Edward Selden, Thomas Munn, Jean Bodin, Jean-Baptiste Colbert, Josiah Child, William Petty, John Locke, Charles Davenant, Dudley North, Ferdinando Galliani, James Denham Stewart. Physiocrats. The physiocrats were 18th-century French economists who emphasized the importance of productive work, and particularly agriculture, to an economy's wealth. Their early support of free trade and deregulation influenced Adam Smith and the classical economists, and Robert-Jacques Turgot, François Quesnay, Pierre Le Peasant du Bois-Guilbert, Richard Cantillon. Classical political economy. Classical economics, also called classical political economy, was the original form of mainstream economics of the 18th and 19th centuries. Classical economics focuses on the tendency of markets to move to equilibrium and on objective theories of value. Neoclassical economics differs from classical economics primarily in being utilitarian in its value theory and using marginal theory as the basis of its models and equations. Marxian economics also descends from classical theory. Anders Chydenius was the leading classical liberal of Nordic history. Chydenius, who was a Finnish priest and member of parliament, published a book called The National Gain in 1765, in which he proposes ideas of freedom of trade and industry and explores the relationship between economy and society and lays out the principles of liberalism. All of this 11 years before Adam Smith published a similar and more comprehensive book, The Wealth of Nations. Francis Hutcheson, Bernard de Mandeville, David Hume, Adam Smith, Thomas Malthus, James Mill, Francis Place, David Ricardo, Henry Thornton, John Ramsay McCulloch, James Maitland, 8th Earl of Lauderdale, Jeremy Bentham, Jean-Charles Léonard de Sismondi, Johann Heinrich von Thunen, John Stuart Mill, Karl Marx, Henry George, Nassau William Sr., Edward Gibbon Wakefield, John Ray, Thomas Tooke, Robert Torrens. American School. The American School owes its origin to the writings and economic policies of Alexander Hamilton, the first Treasury Secretary of the United States. It emphasized high tariffs on imports to help develop the fledgling American manufacturing base and to finance infrastructure projects, as well as national banking, public credit, and government investment into advanced scientific and technological research and development. Friedrich List, one of the most famous proponents of the economic system, named it the national system, and was the main impetus behind the development of the German Zollverein and the economic policies of Germany under Chancellor Otto von Bismarck, beginning in 1879. Alexander Hamilton, John Quincy Adams, Henry Clay, Matthew Carey, Henry Charles Carey, Abraham Lincoln, Friedrich List, Otto von Bismarck, Arthur Griffith, William McKinley. French Liberal School. The French Liberal School is a 19th-century school of economic thought that was centered on the Collège de France and the Institut de France. The Journal des Economistes was instrumental in promulgating the ideas of the school. The school voraciously defended free trade and laissez-faire capitalism. They were primary opponents of collectivist, interventionist and protectionist ideas. This made the French school a forerunner of the modern Austrian school. Frédéric Bastiat, Maurice Bloch, Pierre-Paul Leroy-Beaulieu, Gustave de Molinari, Yves Guyot, Jean-Baptiste Say, Elia Couteau and Say. German Historical School. The historical school of economics was an approach to academic economics and to public administration that emerged in the 19th century in Germany, and held sway there until well into the 20th century. The historical school held that history was the key source of knowledge about human actions and economic matters. Since economics was culture-specific, and hence not generalizable over space and time, the school rejected the universal validity of economic theorems. They saw economics as resulting from careful empirical and historical analysis instead of from logic and mathematics. The school preferred historical, political, and social studies to self-referential mathematical modeling. Most members of the school were also socialist, i.e., concerned with social reform and improved conditions for the common man during a period of heavy industrialization. The historical school can be divided into three tendencies. The older, led by Wilhelm Roscher, Karl Keynes, and Bruno Hildebrand; the younger, led by Gustav von Schmoller, and also including Etienne Laspires, Karl Bucher, Adolf Wagner, and to some extent Leo Brentano; the youngest, led by Werner Sombart and including, to a very large extent, Max Weber. Predecessors included Friedrich List. The historical school largely controlled appointments to chairs of economics in German universities, as many of the advisors of Friedrich Althoff, head of the university department in the Prussian Ministry of Education 1882–1907, had studied under members of the school. Moreover, Prussia was the intellectual powerhouse of Germany and so dominated academia, not only in Central Europe, but also in the United States until about 1900, because the American economics profession was led by holders of German PhDs. The historical school was involved in the Methodenstreit with the Austrian school, whose orientation was more theoretical and a prioristic. In English-speaking countries, the historical school is perhaps the least known and least understood approach to the study of economics, because it differs radically from the now dominant Anglo-American analytical point of view. Yet the historical school forms the basis, both in theory and in practice, of the social market economy. For many decades the dominant economic paradigm in most countries of continental Europe. The historical school is also a source of Joseph Schumpeter's dynamic, change-oriented, and innovation-based economics. Although his writings could be critical of the school, Schumpeter's work on the role of innovation and entrepreneurship can be seen as a continuation of ideas originated by the historical school, especially the work of von Schmoller and Sombart, Wilhelm Roscher, Gustav von Schmoller, Werner Sombart, Max Weber, Joseph Schumpeter, Karl Polanyi. English historical school. Although not nearly as famous as its German counterpart, there was also an English historical school, whose figures included William Whewell, Richard Jones, Thomas Edward Cliff Leslie, Walter Bagehot, Thorold Rogers, Arnold Toynbee, William Cunningham, and William Ashley. It was this school that heavily critiqued the deductive approach of the classical economists, especially the writings of David Ricardo. This school revered the inductive process and called for the merging of historical fact with those of the present period. Edmund Burke, Richard Jones, Thomas Edward Cliff Leslie, Walter Bagehot, Thorold Rogers, William J. Ashley, William Cunningham. French Historical School. Clement Juglar, Charles Giddy, Albert Afdalian, Émile Levasseur, François Simond. Utopian Economics. William Godwin, Charles Fourier, Robert Owen, Saint Simon. Georgist Economics. Georgism or Geoism is an economic philosophy proposing that economic outcomes would be improved by the redistribution of economic rent resulting from control over land and natural resources through levies such as a land value tax. Harry Gunnison Brown, Raymond Crotty, Otmar Edenhofer, Fred Folveri, Mason Gaffney, Henry George, Max Hirsch, Wolf Laginski, Philippe Legrain, Donald Shope, Nikolaus Tideman. Marx and Economics. Marx and Economics descended from the work of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. This school focuses on the labor theory of value and what Marx considered to be the exploitation of labor by capital. Thus, in Marx and economics, the labor theory of value is a method for measuring the exploitation of labor in a capitalist society, rather than simply a theory of price. Edward Bernstein, Richard D. Wolff, Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels, Neo-Marx and Economics, David Gordon, Samuel Bowles, Paul A. Barron, Adam Przeworski, Henrik Grossman, State Socialism, Henry de Saint-Simon, Ferdinand Lassalle, Johann Karl Rodbertus, Fabian Society. Ricardian socialism. Ricardian socialism is a branch of early 19th century classical economic thought based on the theory that labor is the source of all wealth and exchange value, and rent, profit and interest represent distortions to a free market. The pre-Marxian theories of capitalist exploitation they developed are widely regarded as having been heavily influenced by the works of David Ricardo, and favored collective ownership of the means of production. John Francis Bray, John Gray, Charles Hall, Thomas Hodgkin, William Thomson. Anarchist economics. Anarchist economics is a set of theories which seeks to outline modes of production and exchange that are not governed by coercive social institutions. Mutualists advocate market socialism. Collectivist anarchists work as cooperatives and salaries based on the amount of time contributed to production. Anarcho-communists advocate a direct transition from capitalism to libertarian communism and a gift economy with direct communal democracy. And anarcho-syndicalists work as direct action and the general strike. Charles Fourier, Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, Peter Kropotkin, Mikhail Bakunin. Distributism. Distributism is an economic philosophy that was originally formulated in the late 19th century and early 20th century by Catholic thinkers to reflect the teachings of Pope Leo XIII's encyclical Rerum Novarum, and Pope Pius XI's encyclical Quadragesimo Anno. It seeks to pursue a third way between capitalism and socialism, desiring to order society according to Christian principles of justice while still preserving private property. G.K. Chesterton, Hilaire Belloc, Institutional Economics, Gunnar Myrdal, Thorstein Veblen, John Rogers Commons, Wesley Clare Mitchell, John Morris Clark, Robert A. Brady, Clarence Edwin Ayres, Romesh Dutt, John Kenneth Galbraith, Jeffrey Hodgson, Ha-Jun Chang, New Institutional Economics, Douglas North, Oliver E. Williamson, Ronald Coase, Darren Acemoglu, Stephen N. S. Chung. Neoclassical economics. Neoclassical economics is the dominant form of economics used today and has the highest amount of adherents among economists. It is often referred to by its critics as orthodox economics. The more specific definition this approach implies was captured by Lionel Robbins in a 1932 essay, The Science Which Studies Human Behavior as a Relation Between Scarce Means Having Alternative Uses. The definition of scarcity is that available resources are insufficient to satisfy all wants and needs. If there is no scarcity and no alternative uses of available resources, then there is no economic problem. William Stanley Jevons, Francis E. Sidrow Edgeworth, Alfred Marshall, John Bates Clark, Irving Fisher, Knut Wicksell, Lausanne School, Antoine Augustin Cournot, Eliacuto N. Walras, Vilfredo Pareto, Austrian School. Austrian economists advocate methodological individualism in interpreting economic developments, the subjective theory of value, that money is non-neutral, and emphasize the organizing power of the price mechanism. Austrian economists generally advocate a laissez-faire approach to the economy. Karl Menger, Eugen von Bohm-Barwick, Ludwig von Mises, Friedrich Hayek, Friedrich von Wieser, Henry Hazlitt, Frank Fetter, Israel Kirzner, Murray Rothbard, Robert P. Murphy, Lew Rockwell, Peter Schiff, Mark Faber, Walter Block, Hans Hermann Hoppe, Jesus Huerta de Soto, Fritz Machlup, Stockholm School, Gunnar Myrdal, Bertil Ohlin. Keynesian economics. Keynesian economics has developed from the work of John Maynard Keynes and focused on macroeconomics in the short run, particularly the rigidities caused when prices are fixed. It has two successors. Post-Keynesian economics is an alternative school, one of the successors to the Keynesian tradition with a focus on macroeconomics. They concentrate on macroeconomic rigidities and adjustment processes, and research micro-foundations for their models based on real-life practices rather than simple optimizing models, generally associated with Cambridge, England and the work of Joan Robinson. New Keynesian economics is the other school associated with developments in the Keynesian fashion. These researchers tend to share with other neoclassical economists the emphasis on models based on micro-foundations and optimizing behavior, but focus more narrowly on standard Keynesian themes such as price and wage rigidity. These are usually made to be endogenous features of these models, rather than simply assumed as in older-style Keynesian ones. John Maynard Keynes, Joan Robinson, Paul Krugman, Paul Samuelson, Peter Bofinger, Joseph Stiglitz, Nouriel Roubini, Stanley Fisher, Gregory Mankiw, Jason Furman, Hugh Dixon. Chicago School. The Chicago School is a neoclassical school of economic thought associated with the work of the faculty at the University of Chicago. Notable, particularly in macroeconomics, for developing monetarism as an alternative to Keynesianism, and its influence on the use of rational expectations in macroeconomic modeling. Frank H. Knight, Jacob Viner, Milton Friedman, Thomas Sowell, George Stigler, Harry Markowitz, Merton Miller, Robert Lucas, Jr., Eugene Farmer, Myron Scholes, Gary Becker, Edward C. Prescott, James Heckman, Carnegie School, Herbert A. Simon, Richard Syatt, James March, Victor Vroom, Oliver E. Williamson, John Muth, Neo-Ricardianism, John von Neumann, Piero Straffa, Luigi L. Passanetti, Vladimir Karpovich Dmitriev,